Hey everyone, welcome back to another week of the Triple Play. This is Danielle. This week we have a lot to talk about with UT football. A really exciting win in overtime against South Carolina. Finally, SEC win for the Vols that we've been looking for. And we'll look around at some other games in the SEC. There's no game this weekend for the Vols, so we have a bye week to look forward to and then to prepare for games against Kentucky and Missouri. But we'll go ahead and just start with South Carolina game. This week I'm joined by Colby once again. So let's just go ahead and put out there that Josh Dobbs is a maniac, and he just blew everyone away. I can't even talk correctly whenever I think about Josh Dobbs. I'm just so blown away by him right now.
Yeah, he got he won SEC Quarterback of the Week and Athlon Sports Player of the Week as well. He broke a Tennessee record for rushing yards by a quarterback and threw for 301 yards. So pretty ridiculous stat line and game for him this week as well.
Yeah, like you mentioned, 301 yards, 23 for 40 for attempts and completions, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Not only that, but he was the lead rusher for the Vols this week. 24 attempts, 166 yards, 3 touchdowns. His longest rushing touchdown was 36 yards, which I would have never would have expected from him. But he's really mobile. We need that in a quarterback right now. Just overall for the Vols, not bad numbers whenever it comes to totals. Passing 301 yards for the Vols in comparison to South Carolina's 377. Rushing 344 for the Vols. That's intense. I didn't think we'd put up that many rushing yards this week. 248 for South Carolina, but 645 total yards for the Vols. That's the 4th most in a single game in school history. Not too bad, but like we mentioned, it was an overtime win. The Vols were down 42-28 with less than 5 minutes in the 4th quarter. This makes it the 3rd largest 4th quarter comeback in UT history. Dobbs with a 3-yard run with a minute 50 left in the 4th put it at 35-42, and then Dobbs passed it over to Kroom with 11 seconds left to tie it in the 4th quarter. But the game winner came off of Medley's toe in overtime, winning it 45-42. But it looked like South Carolina could have possibly tied it up in OT, but 58-yarder is just not something that's going to be easily achieved.
No, not in those conditions either. It's windy all night, and Medley missed 2. They were awful kicks. And I'm not really sure if the last kick by South Carolina was blocked or if it was just a bad kick, but it is almost an impossible feat for them to even have a chance at making that kick.
Definitely, and looking over at South Carolina, Dylan Thompson put up some really good numbers, 20 for 32, 347 yards, 2 touchdowns, but he was sacked 5 times. But I think the player to talk about for South Carolina was definitely Pharaoh Cooper, 11 receptions, 233 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I'm just happy that we were able to stop him. For a while there, I was thinking there was no way he could be stopped. But luckily, defense really came out, played well. A.J. Johnson, I want to say he had like 10 tackles on his own, which wasn't too bad. Also, Brian Randolph had 14 tackles, so not too bad there. But I mean, we're not really surprised with the defense this season. They're really, really doing well. But whenever it comes to 3rd down conversions, because that's been something that the defense has really been working on. South Carolina was 6 for 13 on 3rd down conversions. The Vols were 7-16, which isn't too bad. I was hoping for maybe a little bit higher, but still pretty good. Overall, I would say this was a really good game for the Vols. This is a win that they were definitely looking for, but looking at some notes for the game, it was just so many records either tied or set or just like notable things to happen. But one thing that really stood out on the defensive side, A.J. Johnson became the first player in Tennessee history with 200 career assisted tackles. Right now he's at 203, which is the most in Vol history. Really good to see that from him. Josh Dobbs became the first player in Tennessee history to pass for 300 yards and rush for 100 yards in the same game. And also for the offense, they had a 300-yard passer, 2 100-yard rushers, and a 100-yard receiver for the first time in school history. Dobbs, of course, with the 301 passing yards and 166 rushing yards. Jalen Hurd with 125 rushing yards. and Pig Howard with 109 receiving yards. I think this was definitely a premier game for our offense in general. They just look really, really strong.
Yeah, and it's kind of been weird to see this season go, is because the beginning of the year, the defense was just stellar, and our offense was really struggling to move the ball. Florida, we didn't even score a touchdown. And then, now it's shifted to where our defense is kind of, we gave up 34 to Alabama, now 42 this week, but the offense has really picked up the pace, and, the team's kind of starting to change their identity a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see how we go from this point on.
Definitely, and I think it's also a bit of a blessing in disguise having a bye week this week. This will really help us to prepare for the rest of the SEC slate that we have. We have Kentucky coming up on the 15th, Mizzou on the 22nd, which will be covered by the SEC Network, and the SEC Nation will be coming for that game for their morning show, which is really exciting, and then we'll be closing off the season with Vandy. But first, looking at the Kentucky game on the 15th, which has been scheduled for 4 p.m., covered by the SEC Network. I think going into the season, most people thought, okay, easy win for the Vols. But something has happened in Commonwealth Stadium where they've only lost one game there. There's just magic for this team. Stoops has really done you can't deny it, he's done a really good job with this team. Just looking at Patrick Towles this season, I'm surprised by him. He's put up numbers that I would have never expected.
Yeah, I really like Tolles. I think he's a really good pro prospect. He's got good height and he slings the ball well. But as far as the team goes, Kentucky has definitely been probably the surprise team of the SEC. They lose to Florida in triple overtime, and there are some questionable calls in that game. They upset South Carolina, and you start to think, are they for real? And then they get blasted by LSU, but then, they come back and they show out against Mississippi State and almost win that game.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm not really sure what to expect from Kentucky. I think next week when they play Georgia will be a good indicator of how good they really are. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that it's going to be a cakewalk Kentucky game like it usually is.
Yeah, absolutely. And also going into the season, whenever the first few games of the season, I know for Kentucky, the biggest hype that was surrounding their team was for their rush game. They looked really fast, really strong with rushing. On the season, they have 1,381 rushing yards, which isn't too bad. I mean, I'm not really used to seeing a good rush game from Kentucky, but if you look over at passing, 2,291 total yards in passing. Patrick Towles has 2,235 of those yards. He's gone 182 for 307, 13 touchdowns, 5 interceptions on this season. Not too horrible there. But yeah, definitely really surprised by the Kentucky team this year. I know Stoops is a good coach and everything, but to really bring this much hype back to Kentucky is a big thing because they've always just been known as that basketball school. Big Blue Nation always showing out, really big for them. Just really surprising, but still for Kentucky, you can't deny the fact that they do deserve to have a season like this. Things have not been easy for them. But looking ahead for Missouri in a couple of weeks, definitely not going to be an easy game. Mizzou's usually really good. Luckily, I'm just happy we're not playing them at Mizzou because that's not an easy environment. But if you look at where we need to stop them, whenever it comes to like passing yards, Matty Mock, he's just been up and down all season. 133 for 254 with completions and attempts, 1,532 yards. I think it's tough to really say like what really needs to be done to beat Mizzou. Like I said, it's been kind of an up and down year for them. But I feel like it could all come down to how Matty Mock plays whenever we play them.
Yeah, Mizzou, they're winning the East right now, and, it's kind of surprising that they're in front, but the East has just been crazy. But, they beat South Carolina when we all thought South Carolina was really good. Then Georgia shuts them out, and then they beat Florida, but they beat Florida with a terrible offensive showing. They just had a freak defensive game. They only beat Vandy by 10, and then they only beat Kentucky by 10, and now they play A&M this week. So Mizzou's another confusing team. They lost to Indiana. So, but Matty Mock is really, he goes as they go. If he plays well, they usually play well. But their run game, they've got two stout running backs, Russell Hansborough and Marcus Murphy, who both have 500 yards this year. And, I don't know. They got a good receiving core. And I just never know with Missouri. Missouri's a game I feel like we could easily lose, but we could, easily win too. So I'm just not really sure what to think about Mizzou.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. It's kind of just, that's one game that all season, whenever I've looked at the schedule, 1 week I'd say, okay, yeah, we're looking pretty good. They're looking a little not so stellar. Maybe we could stand a chance, but it's just back and forth every week. But this Saturday, Missouri and Kentucky played against each other, like you mentioned. Missouri won only by 10 points, 20-10. But looking at the stats, Matty Mock was 18 for 33 for 164 yards with 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. But Patrick Tolles, he still had a really strong game, 19 for 36, 158 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Going back to Matty Mock, I just want to point out that he was also the lead rusher there for Missouri, 14 carries, 75 yards, no touchdowns, but his longest run was 32 yards. Bit surprising there. But I think you're completely right. Whenever we play Mizzou, it'll all depend on how well Matty Mock is, because they do thrive off of him. So that should be really interesting. But looking around at the SEC, it wasn't too much of a really exciting weekend, apart from Florida upsetting Georgia 38-20, which kind of caught me off guard. But I thought maybe Georgia's rush game would come out and be a little stronger. Still, for rushing, they only put up 141 yards on rushing. Florida had 418. Passing yards for Florida, really struggling, 27 yards, but 319 yards for Georgia. It might just be just me that was thinking it. I mean, going in, I thought Florida might look a little strong, but I was expecting Georgia to just be a lot stronger than they came out to be.
Yeah, as far as Georgia goes, Sony Michel's been hurt, and of course Gurley's still suspended. Chubb's been playing well. He had 156 yards and a score, and Hudson Mason's not playing bad, but Florida's defenses, I think they're seriously underrated. I know Florida gets a bad rep as a bad team this year, but they've got a serious chance to win the East. And, they finally start Traylon Harris, and, they don't start Driscoll. But, Traylon Harris didn't really even have to do anything when Kelvin Taylor and Matt Jones both run for over 190. And, they're averaging over 7.5 yards a carry. Think how frustrating that's got to be for Georgia to just, they're about to hand it off, and you can't even stop it. And Florida's definitely thrown a monkey wrench into the East now, because we have no clue who's going to come out of the East. And an even bigger conversation is, Florida's got a serious shot at finishing 8-4 this year. They finished with Vanderbilt, South Carolina, Eastern Kentucky, and Florida State. And if they do finish 8-4 and say they lose to Florida State, can you really fire Will Muschamp when he goes 8-4? Even though their recruiting class is really falling apart. I mean, he's kind of saving the season. So Florida's they've got a lot of things going on for them.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there with Muschamp. He's been kind of under a lot of fire recently, but if you do go 8-4, it's going to be really tough, I'd say, for the AD down in Florida trying to make that decision. But I mean, 8-4, that's a good season. It's really tough to just fire your coach on those terms, but Florida's just been they've struggled this season, and I mean, us Vol fans are really excited to see that, but it's been a tough season for them, so it'll be really interesting to see what all happens with Muschamp. But looking over at some other SEC games, Mississippi State edged Arkansas 17-10. Arkansas is still winless in the SEC, and if they could have won this week, that would have changed everything. Mississippi State is still undefeated. They're 5-0 in the SEC, but Dak Prescott this week, just completely insane. 18 for 27, 331 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Pretty sure that's a career high for him in terms of yardage, so not too bad there. Just Arkansas, I mean, they still put up 401 total yards, 238 yards whenever it came to passing, which is really good. Brandon Allen really took control there. But it's just, at this point, I'm starting to wonder, when will Mississippi State be stopped and if they'll ever be stopped. But, I mean, only winning by 7 to a team like Arkansas, that's a big surprise.
Yeah, their last 3 games have been pretty close. Auburn 2-score game, Kentucky, of course, was a 1-score game. And
Yeah.
They returned the onside kick, and then Arkansas, who they can't seem to get a win in the terribly hard to play against SEC West. But Mississippi State plays UT Martin this week, so pretty much a bye, and then they get Alabama, which is going to be the big game to see. The winner of that game is probably going to win the West, you would think, unless with Ole Miss losing Treadwell now. But Prescott's playing well. I think it's probably a race between him and Mariota at this point for the Heisman Trophy.
Absolutely. And
Mississippi State, I mean, they've got Alabama and Ole Miss, but if you win that, you're in the championship, you're undefeated, and you're looking at the playoffs. So, we're gonna get to see how really, really good Mississippi State is in these next 3 weeks.
Yeah, definitely. They've really made the SEC exciting this year. I mean, just coming out, I was not expecting them to be like top of the SEC or even top of the NCAA in general. Just whenever I think about like strong football teams, I would not put them in that list in the past few years, but it's really exciting for them. But while we stay in the state of Mississippi, we'll move over to Ole Miss's game against Auburn. Really close one there. Auburn ends up winning 35-31, but I think while there were still really high yards, 507 yards for Auburn, 492 for Ole Miss, the talk of the game really came with Treadwell's injury at the goal line. It was not pretty by any means.
No, and this is a game that Ole Miss should have won. Bo Wallace, once again, he kind of makes a bonehead play with the ball when they're about to score with about 5 minutes left. So the Ole Miss defense gets a stop, and then of course they throw the screen to Treadwell, and he's really inches away from scoring on what would have been a highlight run. And of course, the injury occurs, and it kind of seemed like you could kind of see the vibe in the stadium. Kind of felt like that there went everything Ole Miss has worked for this season. It was really kind of heartbreaking because we don't know how good Ole Miss is going to be next year. Yeah, they've got a lot of players, but they're losing a lot. Their recruiting class isn't a fantastic recruiting class this year. So, Ole Miss probably really felt like this is their year, and then you lose without a doubt, your best player on offense. Just tough break for them.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned Bo Wallace. He was 28 for 40, 341 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interception there for him. But looking over at Nick Marshall, 15 for 22, 254 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Bo Wallace has really been surprising this season. He's just done really well, but yeah, definitely a few mistakes there from him. Not just in this game, but I think it was last week's game. There were a few mistakes there too, but still good win for Auburn. I mean, they're still number 3 in the nation. Ole Miss at number 4, but definitely was expecting Ole Miss. I really thought Ole Miss would still beat them, but didn't look that way. Auburn came out, played fairly well, so good win there for Auburn. But looking over at some other games, Texas A&M beat Louisiana Monroe 21-16. Vanderbilt, they beat Old Dominion 42-28. Good win for them. They're 3-6 on the season, 3-3 at home. But like I've said, pretty much a down week, I guess you could say, for the SEC. Not too much excitement there, apart from the upset by Florida. But looking over at the rest of college football, Thursday night there was an exciting game between Florida State and Louisville. I, for the longest time, thought Louisville was going to upset them, and it would have made me very, very happy. But Florida State ends up winning in Louisville 42-31. Florida State really rallied back to win that, to win the game. I mean, in the fourth quarter alone, they scored 21 points, which not a surprise for Florida State. They're really just a team that whenever you think they're down, they're just going to come right back and win. Jameis Winston was 25 for 48 with 401 yards, 3 touchdowns, but 3 interceptions, which was a really I'm not used to seeing that many interceptions from him. But 401 yards in passing, which took up a majority of the total yards for Florida State. They had 574 total yards, but this game kind of made me wonder if there's just something that's not clicking in Florida State that is going to make them struggle, or if Louisville just really showed their stuff.
Yeah, as far as the game goes, Louisville really came out. Petrino had a good game plan, and Michael Dyer, blast from the past, he ran all over Florida State.
Yeah.
And Winston had a rough first half, but when it mattered, Winston made good plays and showed why he's such a good player. And, he's putting up a decent season. Probably not going to be in the Heisman contention because of the off-field stuff. But as far as Florida State goes as a team, they keep winning. The Notre Dame game was a really impressive win for them.
Yeah.
And they should win out. They got Virginia, Miami, and their last game was against Florida, which will be a big game. But there's a good chance Florida State's probably going to get into the ACC championship, and they're more than likely going to be in the playoff picture. So I think we'll really find out what we need to know about Florida State when they play Florida, and from that point on.
Absolutely. And looking at another game, it was really exciting. If we want to just talk about some overtimes like UT had, but there was a double overtime game between Duke and Pitt, which I can say, as a person who watches Pitt football, I was not expecting a double overtime game against Duke. 51-48, Duke ends up winning that one. But James Conner, who at the beginning of the season, he was a name that was thrown out there for the Heisman. He had 38 carries for 263 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's just insane. But Anthony Boone for Duke, he put up some really big numbers, 266 yards for 3 touchdowns. But, I mean, whenever you have, I'd almost call that, I don't want to say a premier ACC matchup because they aren't two top teams in the ACC by any means. But, I mean, Duke is 7-1 overall, 3-1 in the ACC, and Pitt has been struggling a bit. They're 4-5, 2-3 in the ACC. But that was definitely a really big surprise. One game that I wish I could have watched. But, I mean, kudos to Duke. They must be doing something right. I never would have expected this kind of game.
Yeah, as far as James Conner, he's been putting up these type of numbers all year. And, he's 6'2", 250. He's got decent speed for his size.
Yeah.
And, he's looking like a very good pro prospect. And, he might have a chance at the Heisman next year. Who knows? Pitt's probably not going to play that well as a team, so he's probably not going to have a great chance. But, Voytik, who's from Tennessee, went to Cleveland High School. He's been doing well at quarterback. And as far as Duke, David Cutcliffe always has good quarterbacks. And he's kind of, he's got the right system, I think, with Duke. Obviously, Duke's not going to pull in the best players. So he takes these guys, he develops them. And he pretty much just plays the we'll outscore you game.
Yeah.
And, Duke's probably going to make it to the ACC championship again. Their schedule's not that tough, which is the ACC, so. But, they'll probably face Florida State again. I mean, who knows? Duke didn't really lose anybody from last year. That could be a game. So, yeah, I mean, Cutcliffe's really doing an amazing job with the Duke program as far as football goes.
Absolutely. And you mentioned with James Conner putting up those kind of numbers all season. He's had 220 rushing attempts for 1,342 yards, averaging 6.1 yards per rush and 17 touchdowns this season. Last season, he only had 8 touchdowns. So it's really good to be seeing that from him, a really big turnaround. Granted, like you also said, he's only a sophomore. So there's still a lot more that we could be seeing from him. But, yeah, definitely with Duke, they've done really well as of late. Last season was really fun to watch them. But for the ACC, everybody's going to go ahead and say that it's going to be Florida State winning it all. But I'm going to go ahead and say I wouldn't be surprised to see Duke beat them we'll go ahead and say when they face each other for the ACC championship. But I don't know. I think this could be... We could really need to watch out for Duke. They're number 24 in the nation right now. Still really low, but they definitely could be a big surprise. Looking at some other games from this weekend, TCU beat West Virginia 31-30 in Morgantown. I was hoping TCU would put up a bigger lead against them, but I mean, a 1-point game, really exciting there. TCU is really doing well this season. I want to say they started off the season down at like number 24 or 23 in the in the AP polls, but I mean, to have them up at 7 now, that's really good for them. Kansas State just blew away Oklahoma State 48-14. Notre Dame beat Navy 49-39. I'm surprised that Navy put up 39 points against Notre Dame. Their Navy is 4-5 on the season. I would have loved to have seen a win there from Navy, but Notre Dame was just too much for them. Notre Dame 7-1 on the season right now. Oregon beat Stanford 45-16. UCLA beat Arizona. That's not a really big upset. I mean, there's still like 10 spots between them, but UCLA there's something going on with them too. They're 7-2 on the season right now, 4-2 in the Pac-12. They won 17-7. Their defense really showed up in that game against Arizona, so good for the Bruins there. Arizona State beat Utah in a close one in overtime as well, 19-16. Ohio State just routed the Fighting Illini of Illinois 55-14 there, but I feel like we're getting used to seeing Urban Meyer put up the points against teams. He's just running up the score week in and week out. Nebraska beat Purdue 35-14. Oklahoma beat Iowa State 59-14, and Temple with the upset over East Carolina 20-10. I wouldn't have thought about that, and I want to say that's Temple's first upset of a ranked team since like 1998, I think. Not too bad there for them. That's really surprising, but good for the Owls. They're 5-3 on the season right now, 3-2 in the American Conference. But I must say that's one game that has really shocked me this weekend. I really thought East Carolina would just put it to them, but I guess I was wrong. Baylor beat Kansas 60-14. Not too much of a surprise there. Bryce Petty in that game, he had 277 yards for 3 touchdowns. Really good game for him. Overall, pretty normal weekend, I would say, for the NCAA. Not too many big games, but overtime. That seemed to be a little bit of a theme for this weekend. But going ahead and looking over at the NFL real quick, it was what everybody says every time they play each other. It's the matchup of the 2 greatest quarterbacks in the league. Broncos played against the Patriots in Foxborough. Patriots, they just took control and beat the Broncos 43-21. Peyton Manning still just being Peyton. He put up really good numbers, 34 for 57, 438 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. That kind of surprises me. I was hoping that, I mean, that's still a small margin, but it's still a lot for Peyton to put up 2 interceptions. He got sacked once, but looking over for Tom Brady, 33 for 53, 333 yards, 4 touchdowns and 1 interception. Brady's, between last week and this week, he's really shown that he's still relevant. He's still doing well, putting up a lot of touchdowns like that. But it's a tough loss for Denver, I would say. Looking at the total yards in general, New England had 398 total yards. Broncos still had 472, not bad there. But whenever it came to rushing, both teams were just really, really low on their numbers. 43 yards total for Denver, 66 for New England. But if you have to listen to the people who want to really critique that game, they're going to go ahead and say that Tom Brady's still the best in the league. But I beg to differ. I don't want to say I'm surprised by these numbers from Peyton. I really thought that the Broncos could come out and win this one. Everybody was hoping for. I mean, if you're a Vol fan, you're wanting the Broncos to win, and especially, I'm not a big Patriots fan. I'll just throw that out there. So anytime the Patriots can lose, I'm really happy with that. But they're 5-0 at home. They don't really struggle at Gillette Stadium. They seem to really take control there. But I was really hoping for Peyton to really come out and lead the Broncos to a victory over the Patriots, just to say that they beat the Patriots. Because, like I said, not a huge fan. But looking over at another game, the Steelers beat the Ravens in a really, really exciting game, I must say. Last night, Pittsburgh won 43-23. Baltimore was the first one onto the board, but there's just something clicking with the Pittsburgh offense. Ben Roethlisberger threw 6 touchdowns again, which is just ridiculous. I haven't seen him play this well since, I want to say, I was in like 5th grade the last time I remember him playing like this, but his stat line was really impressive. 25 for 37, 340 yards, 6 touchdowns, no interceptions, but he was sacked 3 times. Joe Flacco, 30 for 45, 303 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 4 sacks. But I think this was a really exciting game. But anytime you have the Ravens playing against the Steelers, it's always going to be exciting.
Yeah, Roethlisberger had a great game, obviously. And, the running game for either team wasn't really all that, but I think Antonio Brown is probably playing as well as any receiver in the NFL right now. It seems like every week he's just putting up monster numbers. And, the Pittsburgh defense really did a good job. They just stifled the Baltimore run. And, Flacco had a decent game. It was kind of a quiet 300 yards, but yeah, the Steelers are really clicking, and I think they're a threat in the AFC this year for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And last night, for Pittsburgh, they retired the jersey number of Joe Green, who is honestly, I'm a little biased saying this, but as a Steelers fan, but I would say he's one of the best defensive players to ever grace the NFL with his presence. So it was nice to see the Steelers defense really showing up like they should and playing like the Steel Curtain that played back in the day, and just the Steelers defense that we're so used to seeing. But I feel like if his presence was there, this defense can kind of attribute that to him being there. It was great to have that ceremony at halftime whenever they retired the number. But yeah, definitely a good game there. But looking around at other games in the NFL, Cleveland beat Tampa Bay 22-17. Something's clicking in Cleveland. Not sure what it is, but it's kind of unsettling in some ways, especially since, they're staying relevant in the AFC North, which is a little surprising this season, but they've done really well. Arizona beat Dallas 28-17. Dallas has been really strong this season. They're 6-3 overall, but, not too much of a surprise having the Cardinals beat them. The Cardinals are 7-1. But looking over at the stats for the game, Carson Palmer, who, yes, he's still in the league. I know that surprises a lot of people. He had 249 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception, so not too bad for him. Looking over at some other games, Philadelphia beat Houston 31-21. Cincinnati beat Jacksonville 33-23. I'm surprised that Jacksonville was able to keep it within 10. They're 1-8 on this season. They've really struggled. The Bengals have looked pretty strong this season, but the Jaguars, their only win on the season so far came 2 weeks ago against Cleveland whenever they won 24-6. So you would start to think that maybe they're having a bit of a turnaround. Since their win against Cleveland, they've had some fairly decent games. They were 2 losses. They lost to Miami 27-13. On the 26th of October, and then this week they lost to Cincinnati by 10. But they're, like I said, they're still struggling. But to have those close of games, not too bad for them. Miami completely shut down San Diego, 37-0 there. Minnesota beat Washington, 29-26. Really close game there. Teddy Bridgewater for Minnesota had 268 yards and 1 touchdown. Not too bad there. RG3 was back at it for Washington, 18 for 28, 251 yards, 1 touchdown and 1 interception. I personally was hoping to see Colt McCoy again, but that's just me. I'm a big Colt McCoy fan. But St. Louis beat San Francisco 13-10. And then tonight we'll be seeing Indianapolis go against the New York Giants. That should be a really exciting game. Indianapolis, they had a strong game last week whenever they played the Steelers. There were still some mistakes. Andrew Luck still looked really impressive, but it kind of goes back to like what we said with Maddie Mock. The Indianapolis, they thrive off of Andrew Luck, so if he plays well tonight, they should be able to beat the Giants.
Yeah, I like the Giants to win that game. Luck's having a great year. And Eli hasn't played that well. His stats aren't that bad, but T.Y. Hilton's really stepping up. Reggie Wayne starting to shake the rust off a little bit. And I don't really like the Giants this year. They've not looked good at all. And the Colts look solid. Probably going to win the AFC South. No surprise. But I probably won't even watch the game. Honestly, I don't think it'll be that good of a game.
Right. And then quick mention with the MLB, Giants won the World Series. Madison Bumgarner got the MVP, which wasn't much of a surprise. I mean, he was stellar all throughout October. But I have to say I was hoping the Royals would win. It would have just been a nice little storybook ending for them with this season. I mean, I thought it was really awesome how the two wild card winners were the ones who ended up playing in the World Series. It was an awesome month of October for baseball. Really exciting. Happy for the Giants. Glad they won. They did really well this season, so they deserved it. But quick mention for college basketball. Vol Hoops are back tonight with an exhibition game against Pikeville here at Thompson Bowling, so that should be really exciting this season. I mean, we have a new coach. Hopefully it's going to be a turnaround. Donnie Tyndall seems to really be working hard with this team. Still not completely sure what to expect. I know we have some height, but it's going to be weird not having players like Mayman and Stokes out there. So it's going to be a little bit of a eye-opening season, I would say.
Yeah, Tyndall, I like him. I like his game plans and his philosophies. It's pretty much similar to Rick Pitino at Louisville's philosophies. But, we got a lot of young players that they have talent, but, it's going to take some time for this team to click. And, this team's not projected to do very well. I think they will probably be overachievers, but I'm not sure if this team's going to be good enough to make the NCAA tourney this year. But I'll be interesting to see they play tonight. I know the starting lineup was announced, and it was Kevin Punter at point guard, Robert Hubbs at shooting guard, Josh Richardson at the 3. Derek Reese is going to start tonight over Monty Moore. Apparently, Monty Moore's having some back problems. And Dominic Woodson starting at center. So, Kentucky just played this team and beat them by 48. So, it's kind of a good thing to use to judge how the Vols are going to be this year, maybe. We'll see.
Yeah, definitely. Kentucky, like we've mentioned earlier, they're that basketball school. But for them to only beat Pikeville by, how many did you say, 40, 48? 48, yeah. I really thought that'd be a bigger margin there. Even my dad mentioned last night, who I've talked about on here before as a Kentucky fan, he said that Pikeville should be a little bit tired tonight, so it should be fairly easy for the Vols. But, 48 points, still a lot, but for a team, for them to play a team like Kentucky, that's still kind of small margin there, but it should be a good game tonight. Hopefully we'll be able to judge how well this team will be. Granted, it's just exhibition, but there's still a lot to look forward to with this team. Hopefully it'll be a learning year. I know most fans are going to go ahead and expect so much from the team because that's just how UT fans are. They expect so much from teams no matter if it's a new coach or if it's a coach who's been here for years. But best of luck to Donnie Tyndall with this season. Really excited to see what he does with the Vols program. So yeah, that's basically it for this week. Next week we'll talk more about the upcoming game against Kentucky. Talk a lot about that actually, and then we'll start to look at the Heisman talks since getting close to the end of the season. Like you said, Marcus Mariota, we're obviously expected to see him there. But that's pretty much it for this week. We will see you next week.